You're listening to Building the Broncos with Nick Kendell and Carl Dumler, Broncos Country's leading draft and scouting analysts. Get on over to milehighhuddle.com to sound off on all things Broncos.
Hello there, Broncos Country, and it is once again time for another episode of Building the Broncos. I am your host, Carl Dumler, and with me, as always, I have my co-host and good friend, Mr. Nick Kendell. Nick, I know this was a big weekend for you, Game of Thrones, NFL Draft. You didn't go see Avengers yet, have you?
Nope, I did. I saw that Saturday. So,
oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay, I did know that. I have not seen Avengers. I've not seen Game of Thrones, so I'm a little behind. But we do have the Broncos Draft in the books for 2019. How was your weekend, man?
It was good. It was busy. I mean, got to enjoy all of Thursday and Friday. The weather was nice. Kind of turned for the worst. It's going to rain like crazy this upcoming week. But yeah, no, it was a good, busy weekend. I am tired, but the show must go on, and people still are craving that draft content. So we're going to keep bringing it for them. But overall, I would say A+ weekend.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. It was an A+ weekend, and you know us. I mean, we're going to talk draft as much as we can. You already messaged me about 2020.
Oh yeah,
and looking at some prospects. So just so our listeners know, this is the same as last year. Nick is already on the 2020 class, and
I'm just craving new football. I need new tape to grind, and however that can change. And we got the roster kind of stacked up, and we'll see how this class does. Who takes big improvements, who steps back. But you can already kind of get an idea of what this roster might be looking for next year.
Exactly. Well, we want to make sure that you can find us on Twitter. You can find me at Carl Dumler MHH, and you can find Nick at Nick Kendell MHH. You can follow the podcast Twitter account at BTB Football Pod, and make sure to subscribe to our show and leave us a rating as we value your input. You can find the show on iTunes, Stitcher, and even that of YouTube. Also, make sure you head over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of 24/7 Sports and the CBS Sports Digital, to find ours and our co-writers' articles and all things pertaining to your Denver Broncos. Also, head on over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating under the Huddle Up podcast, where both this show and Chad and Zach's Huddle Up show reside. This podcast is powered by Overtime Media. Well, like we said, Nick, 2019 class is in the books, and I mean, I think we're both pretty darn excited by what the Broncos did. I think if people would have told me that in the first 2 days of the draft, the Broncos would come away with Noah Fant, Dalton, Risner, Drew Lock, and Dre'mont Jones, I would have said either we've traded a 2020 first-round pick to do that, or it would just be impossible. I mean, I'd be laughing about it. Wouldn't you?
Yeah, I would have assumed the Broncos took Lock at 10. They traded up back into the first round for Noah Fant, and they somehow copped Dalton Risner in the second, where they did end up actually copping him. But yeah, it's a pretty good haul there. You can't really complain. I mean, granted, this is just one part of the equation. We got to see what they do when they come in now. But overall, I mean, that's a really good haul there with those first 4 picks.
Well, let's start with the first player here, and it's your boy from Iowa, Noah Fant. Broncos traded from pick 10 to pick 20 with Pittsburgh, got their second-round pick this 2019 draft, and now a 2020 third-round pick that the Broncos are going to have, which is looking very nice. I think I saw, was it Bob Morris tweeted out something about how many of the picks the Broncos have for next year, and I think it was like maybe 11 picks for next season.
That might have been Bob Morris, but also could have been Nick Cohorty, who works for Over the Cap and does the comp pick projections. Okay,
well, I think it was Bob, but I think he was working off of Nick Cohorty's information.
Okay.
And so that I mean, they're working together on some of that. But either way, the Broncos are looking pretty good for 2020 as well, of setting up after getting what maybe some would consider 3 first-round pick value kind of players in this draft. I mean, we just did our breakdown, and we had all 3 of these guys in first-round kind of value for this NFL draft. But anyway, starting here with Noah Fant, Broncos trade back, get this guy, 4.5 40 kind of time, and I had some people saying, "Oh, he's just an athletic freak. He's not really that great of a football player." What do you say to when people say things like that?
Well, I think that you are kind of holding back the analysis. Obviously he is a really good athlete. We saw him do that at the combine. We saw it on tape. and there's still potential there that he can get better just based on his tools. I mean, he was recruited to Iowa. Nebraska recruited him as a defensive lineman, so he's still pretty new to the wide receiver, tight end, receiving position, so to speak. So I think there's still upside there, but he's much more than just an athlete. I mean, he was the main focus of defensive coordinators every single game this season when he played for the Iowa Hawkeyes. I know TJ Hawkinson went 8th overall, more complete player, probably a better yak, a little tougher hands, and better in line. But I mean, there's a reason he went 8 to Noah Fant at 20. And, if you watch both of them and you're seeing all the pancakes, the highlight blocks by TJ Hawkinson, you could walk away with, your opinion that Noah Fant isn't a great blocker. And that's not the case. I mean, he's a solid blocker at the tight end position, and he's gotten better. I do agree that, and he does need to get better there, stronger. His inconsistencies as a blocker are prevalent, but you're not getting on the field of the University of Iowa if you are a complete liability blocking as a tight end. It's just too important to have that tight end be able to do that. So saying that he's, not a true football player yet, I'd say that's a massive stretch, and you are projecting a stereotype on him rather than analyzing what the tape says. Right.
Hey, here's a stat that I think is huge. In 2018, when he was targeted, he had a passer rating of 122.2. And so to sit here and say he's just an athlete, I mean, this guy went and made some football plays. Had 7 touchdowns last year, 11 touchdowns in 2017. And I mean, again, this is a guy that's making football plays. He's not a break tackle kind of guy. He does have some issues with some drops. He did have a 11.4% drop rate this last year. So, I mean, that is something to kind of keep in mind. But when you're looking at this guy, I mean, he's a weapon that the Broncos absolutely have not had on their roster since maybe the prime years of DT being a weapon.
Yeah, I mean, people will make him out to be that Julius Thomas type, but I think he's a better athlete and a better blocker than Julius Thomas ever was.
Right.
Julius Thomas had a lot opened up for him because A, his quarterback was Peyton Manning, and B, he had a good trio of wide receivers all around him in Welker, Decker, and Demaryius Thomas. So I think definitely the best there at tight end since Julius Thomas as far as a receiver weapon. But I think the upside as a complete tight end is not being hammered home enough. Is he ever going to be a dominant inline player? Probably not. He could be good. He could definitely get better there, but that's not why you drafted him. I'm so tired of all these people talking about what these prospects can or cannot do. What does he do well? And there's a lot that Noah Fant does well that he's going to bring to this offense.
Exactly. And so, again, I mean, this is a weapon that the Broncos absolutely needed on that offense. Teams have to respect that speed. I mean, you're talking about, you were saying he's a different athlete even than that of Julius Thomas. Julius Thomas was a 4.7 40 guy.
Yeah.
We're talking 4.5, and it's a true 4.5.
Yeah.
I mean, you watch the film. I just did a film piece on Noah Fant, and there was one play where they tried to double cover him on the goal line. I mean, it was just a 5-yard play, but he outran 2 defenders. They just looked like they were so flat-footed when he made his turn. They stood no chance. And like you said, teams focused on him. They tried to double cover him. They still couldn't even sometimes double cover him because of that athleticism. So, again, adding that to the Broncos, adding a great goal line option. We talked about it on our first-round recap show of just, I mean, you add 4 points to this offense per game, and it changes the whole outlook. You go from bottom 10 to top 10 kind of offense, or right there, 10 to 12, I guess is what I should say. But, I mean, it makes a huge difference from what you're talking about. And those close games last year all of a sudden start turning into some wins. There's really not going to be many linebackers that can keep up with that. Safeties, they can maybe keep up with him, but they can't match up with that kind of size and weight and strength. And, I mean, he just sets up so well for what the Broncos have been missing on that offense. And I'm excited just to see what they can do, especially goal line early on, and then as they add more to his plate, just to see what they can do with him. I saw the video where they had the different coaches and John Elway and everybody speak to him. And maybe the 2 favorite were Scangarello, but also then the tight ends coach for the Broncos, because I loved what he had to say. He said, when we met up with you, I told you if you went to the right system, things would be really good for you. And then he said, you are in the right system. And that's exactly right. He's in the system that loves to take advantage of tight ends, that wants to get them the ball, especially when you got an athletic profile like that of Noah Fant. And so I think early on they do have quite a big plan for him. I mean, I don't know what they can do day one with him. It might be more year two kind of thing, but I do think that they're going to have a lot of plays schemed to get him open, to get the ball in his hands, and have this guy go make some plays for him. Yeah,
no, it's going to be important for him to, be utilizing that pass game. And like we talked about when we first recorded this podcast, when we first took Fant, that he's going to be a stretcher of the field from the seam. I mean, even if he's not making a huge amount of touches per game, and he's a tight end, he's not a wide receiver, probably not going to be a volume player, but his speed is going to open up so much of this offense, and that's from the run game, that's outside, so really great. And luckily Flacco is pretty good throwing to the tight ends in the middle of the field up the seam, unlike the Broncos' last quarterback. So that's great to see. And I do want to touch on, I think that people are almost like pigeonholing him a little bit. He's this athletic tight end. That doesn't make him a bad blocker, so to speak. I think he obviously can get better there. I think he can continue to work on his form and his consistency in the ground game, but he's not terrible. He wouldn't have seen the field if, in fact, he was a terrible tight end at Iowa. It's too important part of the offense to have that tight end be able to block. So he's going to be a lot of fun for this offense, and I am really excited to see just how they utilize him. Even if it's just 40 catches for 6 touchdowns and 400 or 500 yards next year, that's about what I'm expecting. I think anything more than that is gravy, considering tight ends normally take a little bit of time to come into the NFL, but he should open up a lot. And while I don't love the value of a tight end round one, just in a vacuum, picking at 20, trading down, you're playing with house money at that point. It makes sense to me at that point, and taking advantage of a good tight end class. And again, it comes down to, in a vacuum, tight end round one, don't love it, but with how Scangarello lit up talking about this, I think it's going to be a piece that makes so much else of the offense more congruent and function so much better, because they have this type of weapon that can do so much and create spacing problems throughout the field.
Yeah, you and I have talked a little bit in the past about players that were taken after him, and looking at, you were talking about tight end value, but there's not really much behind him that was taken. Jerry Tillery's one. You're looking at maybe a Byron Murphy, DeAndre Baker, but I'd still have Noah Fant rated higher than both of those guys. Then you're starting to get into the conversation about maybe Drew Lock, who they got anyway, or Dalton Risner, who they got anyway. And so when I'm looking at value of what we have on our, when we did our big board podcast, I think he was pretty much the highest guy on our board, wasn't he, other than Drew Lock?
Besides Drew Lock, yes, he was. I had Jerry Tillery higher myself, but again, that's due to interior pass rush bump to tight end. But trading back to 20, I think he was our consensus top guy there, besides the quarterback bump to Drew Lock.
You actually had Tillery ranked 14th and Noah Fant ranked 13th.
Oh man, well there you go. Jeez, way to call me out. So I knew it was close. I feel like that was one. They're definitely on the same tier.
Right.
Did I have Christian Wilkins 12, or was Christian Wilkins 11?
You had Christian Wilkins 12th, yes.
Okay, so it was Fant sandwiched between the two interior pass rushers.
Right.
So there you go. Yep, can't complain.
Sorry, I had to get that straight, because I know we got people who probably point those things out to us if we mess up on that. But no, I remember it was last year or the year before when Evan Ingram, 2 years ago, Evan Ingram was in the draft. And if you've been listening to our show for that long, you know how much I love that kid. You know how much I loved him as a tight end, just because he was such a huge receiving weapon. Ran a 4.4 140. You don't see that out of a tight end. He was more of a glorified wide receiver, if we're really getting down to the nuts and bolts of it. But he had the title of tight end. With Noah Fant, I like him so much more, just because he has more of that potential to be an all-around prospect. Evan Ingram, you knew he was never really going to develop into a great inline tight end. He was never going to be the guy that you trusted to be the lead blocker on a play or anything like that. Noah Fant, he's at least shown enough that you believe in him. He's one, I love, there's one play, he got in trouble for this. He got flagged, but he was blocking after the whistle because he was just wanting to destroy his guy. And I mean, it wasn't that he was trying to be malicious or anything like that. He just wanted to go out there and hit somebody. And when you have that kind of attitude into your blocking, I mean, you saw with Julius Thomas, he made business decisions when he was on the field. There was just a lot of plays where he just decided, I'm not going to touch my guy. The running plays going to the opposite side. I'm not going to do much. Where Noah Fant, at least he really wants to go out there and hit somebody. And so I think he's going to be a great fit. I think he's a guy that's just beginning to maybe scratch the surface of what he can really bring to a team. I mean, you and I have talked about in the past, his route running wasn't always perfect. He didn't always fight as much as he would like through some of the blocks that were trying to get to him. When he was double covered, a lot of times they tried to play that press man coverage against him, sometimes needing to fight through some of those kind of things. But you work on some of that and you add that to his profile. The sky's the limit for this kid, really.
Yeah, the drops are, concentration drops can be there, although I did think that improved this past season. And his strength fighting off contact kind of in the garbage zone, near the line of scrimmage where linebackers really try to displace him from in his routes, that's something that he needs to work on. But I think it's all there. And while he isn't a true yak guy, making the first guy miss, I think that ability, the athleticism is there to do it. It just doesn't seem like that's first nature to him right now. And it might never be, but I think in this offense, there's going to be plenty of opportunities where he's going to be schemed open. And if teams are, over committing to him, that's going to leave somebody else open. But I think he's going to be schemed open a fair amount and create spacing issues. And the biggest thing, obviously that helps a lot. The seam vertically stretching the field there helps a lot. But the biggest thing for me is his red zone ability. He was an absolute red zone dynamite at Iowa the past 2 seasons. There's crazy amount of production from the red zone. Teams knew it was going to him. Still didn't matter. He was getting the ball. He was scoring touchdowns. And the Broncos had one of the worst red zone offenses in the entire NFL last year. Things just really tended to crumble down there. So, scoring 7 instead of 3, that can, even if you add just 4 points a game, more than what the Broncos did last year, you're looking at a vast improvement on the offense. So really that's the biggest thing for me, that I expect to see an immediate impact just because of what type of impact he can make in goal line situations or in the red zone.
Exactly. Well, moving on to our second round pick here. We've already talked about him a little bit, and we had him on here on our podcast. Love the kid. We're rooting for him to become a Bronco, and I think we willed it into existence. I really do. That's exactly, he ended up where he needed to be. And that's Dalton Risner of K-State, local kid, Wiggins, Colorado, 1,000 people town. And this kid was just wanting so badly to be a Bronco. And here he is, adds incredible versatility to the offensive line. Really, they can kind of mix and match how they want with him now. If they think Connor McGovern is better at right guard, they can stick this kid at center. If they think, hey, Connor McGovern, he got a lot of experience there at center, we think year 2 he's going to be better, they can do that too, and they can start this kid at right guard. If Larry's not ready, they can move him over to left guard. He has that kind of potential to be able to do those kind of things. I loved K-State. I don't know what they were doing with some of their offensive play design. There's a lot of times where they were having him pull from that right tackle spot, clear across the entire formation, coming over usually about to the left guard spot, and that would be the hole. And they do some weird things in the backfield, kind of almost like a RPO, but not quite an RPO. I don't know what all they were doing.
Quarterback power game.
Yeah, it was very, very confusing on some plays. But, he would make it to the hole. He would get there to the second level. He'd open up some holes that really shouldn't have been there. And, he's not the most athletic guy. He's not the strongest guy or anything like that, but he is very technically sound. He has very good feet. He is very smart. You can see that on just what he's watching, how he's playing defenders, knowing how to set up against power guys compared to speed guys. It's amazing to watch what he does on the field. And they really ran a lot of their offense based on what they wanted him to do. And that's saying a lot for a right tackle.
Yeah, he was probably their best player on that offense, and you got to cater to your best player. And yeah, no, he was really good. I do like that he has versatility. I do like that he is a guy who has experience with strength coach for the Broncos, Matt McChesney. So I mean, you could tell he wanted to be here. Luckily, he said Broncos have to trade up for him if they wanted to come get him, and he did fall to 41, and that's about where I had him. Do you still have the big board up? Where did I have him on the big board?
You actually had him higher than I did.
You said that was a mistake on your end, though.
I did. Yes, you had him at 24. I had him at 37.
Okay.
And I remember, during our show, I said, man, I can't believe I had him that low, because if we redid it, I would have him a lot higher. And I said that before we drafted him. So it's not like I'm trying to be Homer here or anything like that. But then, to get him at 41, the Broncos twice now have taken players we had much, much higher on our big board.
Yeah. And granted, the big board was catered to fit the Broncos on my end. So, I'm just really smart. So that's why I have those guys so high, because the Broncos were going to take him. I had some inside info. No, just kidding. But no, I'm really excited about this pick. I think he's a great scheme fit for this power game. I don't think he's an elite player. I don't think he has an elite ceiling. Granted, there's a reason he fell to where he did. But I think he has just such an incredible floor. And I would be shocked if he isn't a day one contributor on the interior. Looks like right now right guard, but we'll see how it shakes out. And I think he's got a chance to be a 10-year player on the interior offensive line as a starter. So really can't hate that, and got to be excited about the direction of this unit even. I mean, adding Juwann James to right tackle, adding Dalton Risner to the inside, and now, I mean, with Mike Munchak overseeing it, the offensive line, I mean, last year they were better than many people gave them credit. Pass blocking still had some struggles, but it'd be hard to think they wouldn't continue to improve, even though they did lose Matt Paradis this past offseason.
Right. Well, I mean, and you got to think about all the injuries they had last year. Unless they have those kind of injuries again, that automatically has to give them a pretty good bump. Then you add the Munchak bump. Then you adding a couple really strong players to the offensive line. So yeah, it's a unit that's setting up very nicely, and it's a unit that really could be together for quite a while. Connor McGovern might be gone. Leary could be gone, I guess. But there's three guys: Bowles, James, and now Risner, that could be together for 3 years or so. They got Sam Jones still on the team that I know that they're pretty high on. So it'd be interesting to see what happens with him this year. But it is. It's finally setting up where I feel so much better about the offensive line. The last few years, we've talked about it, that we just were like, I don't know how this group's going to do. There's potential, but there's just so many holes that you're just going, I don't know how I can feel comfortable about what this offensive line is doing. This year, I actually feel very comfortable with where the offensive line is at.
Yeah, and you talked about three guys maybe being there for a while. We'll see about Garrett Bowles. I've been definitely a defender of him, but there's some talk about work ethic and effort. Does he have the mentality to be great? And we're going to find out quickly, but this is a big year for him. But I think James and Risner and Bowles do give you a chance to have a pretty good unit here. And I'm not sleeping on Sam Jones. So we'll see. Maybe Leary is moved or injured again or starts the year slow, and you see Sam Jones somewhere out there. So it'll be interesting, but definitely got to feel better about it, especially with Munchak. I mean, that's honestly the biggest key.
And I will say PFF did have him rated as the best offensive tackle prospect in the draft.
I thought Jonah Williams was higher.
4-year overall grade. If you're combining all 4 years, he had a 92.5 grade. Okay. Jonah Williams had 85.6.
Interesting.
So just throwing that out there, that, I mean, he's improved as his time has gone on, but he's been strong since day one, even as a center. And then he was also the top offensive lineman in run blocking, even over that of Jonah Williams again, and that of Jawan Taylor. So, I mean, this is a guy that's been very, very solid all 4 years of college, and has shown well in pass blocking, run blocking. And again, he's shown already that he has versatility. He played center in both high school, college, played right tackle. We're going to see how he does maybe playing guard here in the NFL. But I think he's just a perfect fit. He's a 3-time captain, which, again, Broncos are looking for those high-character guys that can come into the locker room, be leaders. And I don't think he's going to be the leader day one. I think that's Leary still. But again, you're looking at guys who could really you could build your team around.
Yeah.
I'm not saying offensive lineman is what you try to build your team around, but you look at Paradis, he was kind of that guy that everybody looked to. I think that Risner has that opportunity to be a guy the rest of the offensive linemen look to of what do we need to do to improve.
Yeah, the tone setter. But moving on here, speaking of tone setters, the Broncos walked away with their first 2 picks with day one's impact players and Fant and Risner, and they traded up with the Cincinnati Bengals to pick 42. Denver sent the 52nd, the 125th, and the 182nd pick, and they winded up with quarterback Drew Lock out of Missouri. And, man, that was a little bit of a chaotic moment when that actually happened. You remember the Broncos trade? No, it says the pick is being made. No, they traded with the Bengals. Oh, crud, they moved up to 42. This has to be for Lock, right? This has to be for Lock. Ends up being Drew Lock, and that's definitely excited about that. It's definitely it's a lottery ticket. There's no other way to put it. There's a reason he fell to the 42nd pick, but it's hard not to, for me at least, it's hard not to think that the upside is well worth the cost. Right.
Well, I mean, you look at the Broncos with their second round picks. It's not been as pretty as you would like. I mean, last year we got Cortland Sutton. That was a pretty good pickup. We look the year before that, DeMarcus Walker. What has he done for the Broncos? I mean, he's only played in 13 games, but has really done nothing in those few snaps that he's had. The year before that, Adam Gotsis has been good, but not elite or anything like that. Ty Sembrello for the year before that. We traded him for a 5th-round pick, and I think every Bronco fan celebrated that he brought any kind of value. Cody Latimer, I mean, he's a special teams guy, but did nothing as a wide receiver. Monty Ball, not even in the NFL anymore. Brock Osweiler, I mean, career backup quarterback. So it's one of those things where you want your second-round pick to be a starter, but you're taking some risk here, and it's worth the risk. I mean, Broncos have done fine without their second-round picks always working out. And so if he doesn't work out, it's at least not as big of a blow as if they took him at 10 and then the kid doesn't work out. That's a pretty big blow to the team because you need a top 10 pick to work out. But to get him at 42, it takes a lot of pressure off of him and the organization and gives him some time to develop. I think you're working on an article right now, right?
That's on the docket for tomorrow. But yes.
Tomorrow. Okay. And of why Broncos country should have some patience. I don't want to give everything away from that, but he is a guy that he needs some time. He's not a finished product by any means. He has some things that his footwork is not pretty. His throwing motion, I wouldn't work on it too much just because you start trying to change that. It's going to get a little bit too wonky, I think. But give him some time to learn how to function in the NFL, understand what defenses are trying to do. I mean, you don't even have to work with him as much on game plan stuff. You can work on him just understanding defenses, understanding what you want to do on the offense. And after that 1 year, I mean, look what happened with the Chiefs. I'm not trying to say he's Patrick Mahomes by any means. But, I mean, this is kind of becoming more and more of a trend in the NFL of teams being able to develop their quarterbacks, take some time, and give them that year and then see what they can do on the field. And I know we tried to do that with Paxton Lynch, and that didn't work out. But that really with Paxton Lynch, I think it boiled down to 2 things. One, he did not have a football mind.
Or heart.
Right. And that was going to be my next thing, the football hearts. Well, yeah. I mean, this guy would rather go play. I mean, it's pretty well documented. He'd rather go play video games than worry about football. He seemed very content being a backup. I texted somebody right after I heard some of the interviews with Drew Lock, and I said I felt more comfortable in those first couple interviews than I ever did with Paxton Lynch, just because you can actually feel the fire in Drew Lock. Paxton Lynch was just more of a relaxed, hey, yeah, life's good. I'm excited to be here. We'll just see what happens. Drew Lock's more like, let's get going. And I already saw he on Instagram already put out a picture that he's already working right now. I mean, he took the weekend to relax after getting drafted, but he's already working. I mean, that's more than what Paxton Lynch ever really showed.
Yeah.
So I'm not sorry. I mean, Paxton Lynch his ceiling was off the charts with that big arm, athleticism, all those kind of things, but he just never really worked to reach that potential. Drew Lock, I at least feel comfortable he's going to put in the work. Whether he pans out or not, there's a lot of guys that put in a lot of work. I will say, Brock Osweiler, I think he put in a lot of work. He was a smart guy, but he just didn't have the football ability to be a star in the NFL. Maybe Drew Lock falls into that category. We'll see. But he does have that ceiling to be a very good quarterback, somebody that you can really build around. Maybe even if he becomes like a Joe Flacco, where you have maybe these 3 years of a great Super Bowl window where you surround him with a ton of talent, where it's not all him having to go out and win games, that at least opens up a good Super Bowl window for the Broncos.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And one other point you want to talk to about why this isn't Paxton Lynch, and I think a big thing to talk about is that they have Joe Flacco. Even if Joe Flacco isn't out there, making sure, bending over backwards, that he's the mentor because Drew Lock is the future. I mean, Joe Flacco's here to fight and win and play it for now, but the Broncos are much more stable at quarterback. I mean, the Paxton Lynch rookie year, you had Mark Sanchez and Trevor Siemian. So you got to feel better with Joe Flacco, right? Like that's no comparison. Right. So yeah, got to feel better there. And then there's no pressure to really start your one. Obviously some people are still going to call for it, but he needs time. He started getting a little bit better next year about going through his reads, making the right read, not throwing interceptable balls. He was doing better at using his eyes to manipulate that middle of the field safety. But still, the accuracy, the footwork needs to be cleaned up a lot, staying in the pocket, understanding where he needs to go with the ball when there is pressure up the gut. So stuff like that. And I think that in this offense, he has a very high chance to succeed. Elway hit on it a few times. He kept emphasizing how it's more about the system than it is the actual player. Now, great players make great systems, make no bones about it. But if you can find a guy that can fit the system and marry that system to their skill set, I think you have something going there with a young guy like this. You're not toiling years worrying or wasting guys because they don't fit that skill set. And I think this West Coast offense, people compare him to Jay Cutler, and Jay Cutler was tailor-made for the Shanahan West Coast offense. So really excited about that. And I think that, year one, hopefully we don't see him. If the Broncos kind of fall off a little bit, there's a chance that maybe we see him the end of the year. Luckily, the last 2 weeks are at home and they're against easier teams in the Detroit Lions and the Oakland Raiders, despite the overall schedule being an absolute just monster. But there's a chance we'll see him then, maybe kind of get a little bit of an idea of what he's going to be. But maybe we don't see him at all this year. Maybe we don't see him until 2021 because Flacco plays great. Who knows? Maybe he ends up being, worst case scenario, maybe he ends up being Christian Hackenberg and we're looking to draft a quarterback in a year or two, or maybe even Deshaun Kaiser. We're picking really super high next year and a chance to get like the number 1 or number 2 overall quarterback next year that we love. It's still on the table. This doesn't prevent the Broncos from going quarterback next year. Probably way less likely, but definitely doesn't prevent it from happening. So right. I think that, even if he flames out, the cost of a second-round pick, DeMarcus Walker, Cody Latimer, Ty Sambrailo, some recent second-round picks under Elway, Raheem Moore, it's well worth the risk that he busts because the payoff is huge. Even if he's just a solid starting quarterback, that's huge payoff for a second-round pick. So I think it's well worth the pick.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I'm looking at the picks even after him, and you're sitting there saying, I'm not. They're good players, don't get me wrong, but I don't think any of them have, and part of it's just the quarterback position. None of them have the kind of impact ceiling that a Drew Lock has. When you can possibly add a top 10 quarterback, it doesn't matter. Linebacker, the next pick was Jelani Tavai of Hawaii. I think he's a good player, but I thought that was a little high for that pick. And then you got Elgin Jenkins, Juwann Williams. There we go. Greedy Williams. I know some Bronco fans were kind of hoping for that. I was not. Mm-hmm. I was glad he didn't become a Bronco. And there's a lot of reason he fell clear to the middle of the second round there. There were some that were thinking he wouldn't go until third round even. And so for the Broncos, I love these first 3 picks. I think that they could really be maybe one of the best foundations for the next 4 years that the Broncos have had in a long time. And that's, Elway deserves plenty of criticism for some of his drafts. That 2017 draft, it's terrible. There's no getting around that. Garrett Bowles is the only starter of that group. They've had Walker and Henderson, Henderson's off the team. Walker's probably going to be off the team. Langley's now moved to wide receiver. Jake Butt hasn't been healthy. Isaiah McKenzie's in New York, right?
Buffalo, yeah.
Buffalo, yeah.
In the state of New York.
Right, in the state of New York. I knew I had a good chance You got 3 teams there, so good chance there. But I mean, Chad Kelly just signed with a new team, so we'll see how that happens for him. But that 2017 draft again, I mean, I would take Drew Lock over pretty much any player in that draft by far.
Yeah.
And we took 3 players that we had as first round grades on our big board. I mean, you had Drew Lock as your 5th player on your big board. Now, again, it's Broncos centric, but again, that just shows the kind of value when you're talking about at pick 42. I had him as I think my 15th ranked player, 14th ranked player. And so you're talking about 3 players that the Broncos got in great position. It's just great work by the Broncos. Really great work.
Yeah, can't disagree at all. Well, we need to take another break here because it's Carl's birthday and he's got to go do soccer stuff. I know not American football listeners, don't turn away, but we'll be right back.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right, and this is Nick Kendell back with Carl Dumler on the Building the Broncos podcast, and we're here to talk the rest of the Broncos draft picks, and we're going to kick it off with Dre'mont Jones, interior pass rusher from Ohio State. Carl, what do you think about this first defensive pick out of the Broncos draft?
I think he is what they hoped DeMarcus Walker would be. I mean, and they were hoping Walker could come in and be that nickel interior pass rush. And I think Eric always hit on it of how long Walker always took to get his sacks, that there were more second or third moves that he'd have to do where it was a coverage sack. Dre'mont Jones actually goes and makes plays in the backfield. He actually disrupts things. I really like this pick for what the Broncos need. And we've talked about it on the show that interior defensive line was a bigger need than a lot of Broncos fans are making it out to be. They got 3 guys that could be gone by next season. At least one of them is going to be gone. We know that, right? And
it would be shocking if one wasn't.
Right. And so Dre'mont Jones, this is perfect setup for him. I mean, I think that's one of the great things about this draft is they set up these guys in very successful situations. And for Dre'mont Jones especially, where he doesn't have to be starter day one. He couldn't be a starter day one. His run defense is not great. His ability to anchor, he needs to get into the weight room, get some more strength on his body. But he can actually still bring something day one. You can stick him in there as that 3 tech and pass rushing situations. And this guy will go make some plays. When he gets one-on-one situations, that first step quickness is something that is, I mean, it's pretty impressive. And there was a lot of talk until the last couple of months that he was going to be a first-round kind of value in this draft and was going to maybe get dropped a little bit because of other defensive linemen in this draft. But again, I mean, this is a guy that has very high ceiling, has ability day one to be a pass rusher for the Broncos. And I think he can still get stronger in the run game. And I don't think he's ever going to be top-notch as a run defender, but he can at least develop into a possible good starter, guy that you can really rotate in and out and be that 5 to 7 sack on the interior kind of guy for the Broncos. So I really like this pick, especially for 3rd-round value, something they absolutely needed and definitely got somebody that I really like in this draft. What did you think of it?
Yeah, no, I like him a lot. I do agree with you about his run defense is going to need some work. A guy that people thought maybe first round because, 8 sacks from the interior this past season when Bosa only played like 3 games. So that was big. But he measured smaller and not as athletic. And if you're smaller and not as athletic as people thought, you're probably going to drop a little bit. But the production's there. I do really like that he, you do compare him to DeMarcus Walker, but I think that on tape, he shows a much better first step, which is really important for a one-gap penetrator, especially if they're looking to use him as a sub-package player to start off, which that's what it sounds like. So that's exciting. And while I was really hoping that Zach Allen would fall to them there at 71. He went to the Cardinals about 9 picks before, but I think that his interior ability as a pass rusher, you see the obvious impact year one. Is he ever going to be a starter? That's the hope, but I think probably he's not the starter you'd hope for. He's more of the 3rd defensive lineman that you'd hope for, where you can bring in somebody else. And I think he's a perfect fit year one, and he's going to really push DeMarcus Walker. DeMarcus Walker might not even make this team, honestly. I wouldn't be surprised if the Broncos brought in Demata Pecco and then had Walker probably on the outs, if we're being honest. But I think he's a good fit for this 3 technique. He's going to need to put on more mass. He's going to need to get much better with his ability to stack and shed and play the run gaps. But I think year one, solid player, good quickness, good hand usage, and you put him between Vaughn and Chubb in sub packages with Shelby Harris as that one technique, man, they're going to do some serious quarterback pressures this upcoming season in that formational front.
Yeah, he actually I go always back to PFF, but he was their highest graded defender in the Big Ten this past season. Just to give you a picture of the impact that this guy had. He had a 91.1 overall grade and had a 90.5 pass rushing grade, was in on over 500 pass rushing snaps this last year. And so just kind of shows, they really wanted this guy to get after the quarterback. There's times where you see him disappear if he doesn't win with that first step. There's some times where he can really struggle to get off blocks. He really struggles with double teams, but if he's in that one-on-one situation, I definitely see this as a guy that can go out there and win a lot of plays for you. And so again, third round value, guy that can make a day one impact for you, and probably beyond maybe the top 3 defensive linemen. When we're talking about ability to get after the quarterback, this is my next guy. This is my guy that I'm thinking, okay, really sticking him, especially between Von Miller, Bradley Chubb. This is what you want. And so I can't really fault the pick at all. I really like the value here in the third round. I think he's a player that we both were pretty high on and liked a lot. I had him as my 55th ranked player. I can't remember where you had him.
I don't know, but pretty high. He was right around 50. So, yeah, no, again, Broncos walked out with 4 top 50 players on my board. Really hard to be upset with that value.
And really a lot of them in positions of value too. I know guard isn't quite as valuable, but a guy that can play so many different positions on the offensive line is very valuable.
The versatility, I was going to say, that's exactly right.
And quarterback, it doesn't get much more valuable than that. And interior line pressure, again, when that's something the Broncos needed, that's a great value. Tight end's about the only position that wasn't of huge value, but it's still a huge position of need.
Red zone offense, that's how I'm going to sell it to myself and everyone else. So we got the day 3 picks here, though. Justin Hollins, edge rusher from Oregon. And I was very excited about this pick. It doesn't sound like they know exactly where they're going to use him, though.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Oregon kind of moved him all over the place. They didn't exactly always know what they were trying to do with him either. And, he's a guy that I'll be interested to see what they do with him on being a inside linebacker. I think it's going to take him some time to really develop into an all-around kind of guy because you want this guy coming downhill. That's what he did in college. That's what he's great at, getting after the ball carrier, getting after the quarterback, and making some big plays. But he showed some ability to drop back in coverage too. I'm not trying to take that away from him or anything like that. So it'll just be, I hope that they can figure out a position pretty quickly though, because I hate to see him go through all of training camp trying to learn 2 positions as a rookie. That's asking a lot. To learn how to be an edge rusher and to learn how to be an off-ball linebacker, that's 2 very different tasks. And so I'm hoping they can really kind of cement him into one spot and see what he can do. I honestly, right now, I'd be leaning towards the off-ball linebacker spot just because the adding of Dakota Watson, we're going to talk about that trade here in just a little bit. I think they have at least a little bit more at edge than they do at off-ball linebacker that I would be comfortable with.
Yeah, but you got to put that guy in the best spot too. And like we talked about, this roster wasn't going to be completely overturned in a single season considering how far they have to go. They have needs at potentially secondary because both safeties are probably free agents next year. We're not sure about Chris Harris Jr. They have needs on interior defensive line. They have really big needs that everyone's been screaming about the off-ball linebacker that can cover and play 3 downs. So couldn't get everything year one, and edge depth needs. That's only on defense. So yeah, couldn't get everything year one, but excited about this, and we'll see what he can be. Anthony Barr is a comparison I've heard thrown around. Maybe he'll be an edge, maybe he'll be an off-ball, maybe he could be kind of a hybrid for both of them. But I like the tool set here. He has a lot of production, sacks, interceptions, fumbles. He had some Power 5 record, the only player to do that. I think it was like 2 sacks, 2 interceptions, or 2 fumbles, 2 interceptions, and 5 sacks. So really fun, dynamic player, and I'm really interested to see how he's used. I don't think they know yet. I think they're going to bring him into camp and let the roster dictate and wherever they kind of need him, but I think he's a fun player. I did assess him as edge, and I love his ability to cover as an edge in those short zones. Looks very fluid there. Needs to get stronger, holding the edge, holding the point of attack, getting off blocks. Needs to do a better job of stringing together moves, getting after the quarterback. Not a super, super bendy guy, which, 6'5", not shocking, but that might keep him from being a truly elite edge rusher. But really have to like the athletic upside here for the Broncos. What do you run, a 4.5 40 at his size? I think the only person who ran a better 40 of the edge rushers was Montez Sweat. So really a fun weapon, and I like this one a lot, and I was really pumped about this move. Next one, though, not so much. Actually, I hate to admit it. I was like, wait a second, Juwann who? Juwann Win who? Juwann Winfree, wide receiver from Colorado. The Broncos actually traded up to get him. They picked him 187 overall. The Broncos got Juwann Winfree, and they sent 212 and 237. But, hey, when you're drafting this late, if he's your guy, go get him. But I'm curious, how much have you seen of Juwann Winfree and your thoughts?
I've only watched one complete game of his, and that was against USC. And, I liked what I saw. He won a lot of plays. He didn't have a quarterback that was looking his way as much as he should have been.
Yeah.
But for what the Broncos are wanting at the wide receiver position of that deep threat kind of guy, I don't think he's really that dynamic of a player. There was other players I had on my board, especially at the wide receiver position, that are much higher. Emmanuel Hall would be one. I'm a little disappointed that the Broncos didn't end up with him as an undrafted free agent. We'll talk about that here in just a little bit. But, yeah, this is that one pick that you sit there and say, what are you doing? I think this is maybe you had too many voices from Colorado calling you and telling you, hey, this is a good kid. This is a kid to go get. And so then they just got a little overpumped compared to what the tape shows. Because maybe a team takes him. I don't know. Wide receivers are going off the board like crazy throughout this draft, especially in those mid to late rounds. But he's just not a pick that I'm as excited about. Now, he does have some upside. He's big. I think he's 6'4". He's got a little bit of speed to his game. He's a pretty good route runner. He's a guy that can make some people miss in the open field. There's things to like. There's
injuries. Injuries are the concern.
Right. But, if you're going to go with an injury-prone wide receiver, again, Emmanuel Hall.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's just, like I said, there's just some things that with his game that I'm kind of going, it's okay. It just nothing that jumped off the tape to me. And I hate to say that. I know we have some Colorado fans listening to our show, but we'll see. He's just, again, I've only watched one game. So how much can I really say on this kid? I don't want to get too up or down on this pick until I start seeing him in some of these camps and seeing what he does on the field. But of all the picks that the Broncos made, and of course, it's a 6th round pick. So if that's the pick I'm mad about, I feel pretty good about the draft.
Yep, cannot disagree. And I think he's going to push Tim Patrick. That's his role. They definitely are still looking for a burner, although, again, Noah Fant is a field stretcher from the tight end from the seam. So it's going to be interesting to see how they attack there. And there's plenty of options in 2020. So we'll see. Maybe even the John Ross interest will be rekindled. Who knows? But we got one more break. Carl needs to get out of here, so we're going to take that, and we'll be right back.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All righty, and we're back, and we want to talk about the other trade. The Broncos actually made 3 trades during the NFL draft. No, four trades?
I think 4.
4 trades during the NFL draft, yeah. Trade down for Fant, trade up for Locke, trade up for Winfree, and traded to obtain former Broncos player, linebacker / edge rushers of the 49ers, Dakota Watson. Broncos sent 148. They got Watson back and pick 212, which they then sent with 237 to get Juwann Winfree. So a lot of wheeling and dealing there. But any thoughts on this Dakota Watson, obtaining Dakota Watson? I thought this was probably the most head-scratching move of the draft for me, for the Broncos.
I like Watson just because he's a veteran, so that's nice to add to your team. He's got versatility to both play off ball and edge. That was one thing I loved when he first came to the Broncos. And then he's pretty good at special teams. And so when you're looking at your 3rd and 4th pass rusher, a lot of times you need them to be able to be on the field for getting after special teams as well. So I understand that. It's one of those, though. He's been injured the last couple of years with the 49ers. Hasn't done a whole lot with them. And so I'm not sure value-wise trade, did you really get value back?
Yeah, is this the guy that you needed to get? But granted, you're moving back, 50 slots, 60 slots in day 3 of the NFL draft. It's pretty negligible. Like, it's a pretty negligible cost to get him. So even, 31 years old. I get him special teams, edge rush depth, maybe even off-ball linebacker. We'll see. Familiarity with the team, although new coaching staff, so that'll be interesting. But it seemed like the most head-scratching move of the day for me. But again, the very low risk, for a guy like that. He's going to offer some impact. And even if they cut him, just to have that depth and somebody pushing them there, I think is worth getting. Although at that point, personally, maybe I'd rather just take the guy at 148. But, I like my draft picks.
Right. Because, one thing, I think this is his last year of his contract. Yeah. Compared to a guy that you would have had cost controlled for 4 years. So, you obviously know what you're getting in Watson compared to a draft pick. But there's some of that factored into this, I guess I would say. Of you and I have talked about it a little bit since the draft, that one of our biggest beefs with this draft was not having as much work on day 3. Because a lot of times that really is where you fill out your roster. You get those special team stars. You just get those depth guys that keep things cost controlled so that you can go and make some other signings that you need, or sign the guys. Maybe you can get Chris Harris his deal that you really want to get him, those kind of things. And so not only having these 2 picks kind of limits some of that, but it's not a huge deal. It's just something to kind of keep in mind with this draft.
Yeah, for sure. And now we're going to touch on the Broncos' undrafted free agents. They got Ahmad Gooden, edge rusher from Samford, Joe Dining from Kansas, linebacker, off-ball linebacker, Brett Ripien, quarterback from Boise State, who is probably the crown jewel of this class here, the undrafted free agents, that is. George Aston, fullback from Pittsburgh, Austin Fort, tight end from Wyoming, Brian Wallace, offensive lineman from Arkansas, Trinity Benson, a wide receiver from Eastern Central, wherever the heck that is. John Leglue, offensive lineman from Tulane. Kelvin McKnight, wide receiver from Samford. Jalen Johnson, defensive lineman from Washington. Malik Reed, edge rusher from Nevada. Josh Watson, off-ball linebacker from Colorado. Elijah Holder, cornerback from Stanford. Devontae Jackson, running back from West Georgia. And Jacob Bobenmoyer, long snapper from Northern Colorado. So look out there, Casey Kreider.
You gotta get him some competition. Make sure that he doesn't feel comfortable in his spot, for sure.
Yeah, we don't care you win a Pro Bowl. Watch out for Jacob Bobenmoyer. Sorry if you're listening to this podcast, Jacob. You have a cool name. So anybody on this list stand out to you, Carl?
I think the one that I get the most excited about is maybe Malik Reed.
Yeah.
The Broncos obviously need a pass rusher. And this guy has some ability to bend around the edge. He was a first team All Mountain West. So maybe some of our listeners even have more on this kid than we do. But he ranked first in the FBS in career forced fumbles. He had 11 during his career, 22 total sacks during his time. And I'm interested to see what he does in pushing some of that third, fourth guy on the roster when it comes to finding that edge help. The Broncos seem to have always done pretty well, especially looking in that Mountain West, of finding some players that can really come in and actually do something. So he'd be probably the guy that I think could actually make the roster day one, other than Brett Ripien. And I will be interested to see that quarterback competition. I'm going to guess Grayson is cut before training camp starts, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I can't really see enough reps for 5 guys.
But then it comes down to, could the Broncos actually feel comfortable with 2 rookies behind Joe Flacco?
I think I would. That makes sense to me. I know that either way, if you go to those other quarterbacks, you're probably in trouble this year anyway. So I'd rather just keep the best guys on the roster than worry about veteran status.
Yeah, that makes sense. It adds. When you're looking at Kevin Hogan, does he really add anything? Yeah, no,
that's the thing. They don't have a true and blue backup journeyman, good backup type right now. Kevin Hogan, you shrug your shoulders. I know that I wrote a piece the Broncos should still look at quarterback in the draft 3 months ago, and I had a couple Kevin Hogan truthers find the article and assault me online. So I was like, wow, this is a thing. Kevin Hogan truthers unite.
That's right. There are dozens of us.
Dozens. But yeah, no, that'll be interesting to see there. But it's exciting to see. Hopefully it doesn't turn into a Lynch versus Simeon dichotomy for the fan base. I hate to even talk that into existence, but that's something that concerns me. And I like Malik Reed a lot as well. I don't think he offers much as far as run stopping, but the bend is incredible. And also I'd noticed, how many linebackers they brought up here. 1, 2, 3 linebackers. And Joe Dining is a guy that's a little bit similar to Josie Jewell, not a great athlete, but good instincts. And I was talking to a Twitter follower of mine that I talk with sometimes named Bovice. I actually don't even know his real name, but we'll talk some football. And he was talking about Kelvin McKnight, so I had to check it out. And man, Kelvin McKnight, small wide receiver, 5'8", 190 pounds. But against Florida State this year, for the first game, or second game of the season for them, he had 14 receptions, 215 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That's Samford Bulldogs versus Florida State, and he absolutely took him to the woodshed. Huh. So, yeah, crazy, right? He's a very high-volume receiver, 10 receptions the next game, 12 after that. Then I think maybe he had an injury, but then, finished off the season with 12 receptions, and really good, actually, yards per reception as well, So, really interesting player there, and I'm excited to see what he can bring to the table. Undrafted free agent, so we'll see, but 5'8" guy, maybe some speed to work with. That'll be very interesting. And the other name that sticks out to me is Elijah Holder, more of a press man corner, 6'1", 191, but I think he has some tools there. Not really a good tackler, but again, undrafted free agent. So talk about lottery tickets. These are the absolute low-end lottery tickets. They're the penny stocks of the NFL draft. But, hey, if you hit on one, that could be huge. I mean, Chris Harris Jr., Philip Lindsay. So you never know.
Yeah. It's not the class I was hoping for. There were a lot of players, I'll keep saying his name, Emmanuel Hall, just because I think he was such a perfect fit for what the Broncos needed a wide receiver and would have been great for Drew Lock to keep having his top wide receiver. But, that's just one little thing there.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe they'll find their wide receiver in 2020. I hate to keep saying that, but I think I will talk that one into existence. But any final thoughts here before we wrap it up?
All I have to say is probably of all the drafts that I've really paid attention to big time for the Broncos, this is probably the one I'm most excited about.
Yeah.
I love the players they brought in. I think most of them have very high ceilings, but also pretty high floors and what they can bring to the Broncos. I think most of them can even be day one impact players for the Broncos. You got Risner, who's going to be a day one starter for the Broncos. Unless there's an injury, I can't see that one not happening. Noah Fant's going to get his snaps. Dre'mont Jones is going to make this team, and I think he's going to see some snaps here and there. I don't think he's going to be as big of an impact player as we would hope, but I think he's still going to see some work. And then, of course, if Drew Lock works out, this entire draft just skyrockets to the top of what John Elway has done. And so, and that's saying something with that 2011 class and the impact that they were able to have on getting us a Super Bowl victory. But no, I'm very happy with what the Broncos did. They worked the board very well. They got value. They got positions of need. They got the players that they wanted. And I just kudos to them. Made for a really fun weekend when the Broncos are actually doing some things that you would actually do yourself.
Cannot disagree. Yeah, we'll see. I think it'll come down to Drew Lock, though, in the end. Like that quarterback hit. If that's a hit, even if he's just a Matt Stafford, even just a Matt Stafford, quote unquote, just that kind of guy, that's an absolute hit. So that's probably what it'll come down to in the end. They don't have that true, very safe blue chipper in this class like they did last year with Bradley Chubb. So that might be the difference there for me right now. But hard to really be upset about the results. But that's going to wrap up today's episode of Building the Broncos, powered by Overtime Media. You can find Carl on Twitter at Carl Dumler MHH and myself at Kendell MHH. Also, make sure you head on over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of 24/7 Sports and CBS Sports Digital, to find more content covering the Denver Broncos. Head on over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating and comment, as your support can help us continue to bring you our Denver Bronco deep dives. And that is under the Huddle Up podcast umbrella. So whether it be for Zach, Chad's show, the Huddle Up show, or Building the Broncos with Carl and myself, either way that works. You can follow the Building the Broncos podcast and all our other great audio content by subscribing to the Huddle Up podcast wherever you listen to your shows. You can follow us on Twitter at Mile High Huddle and at BTB Football Pod. For Carl, I'm Nick, wrapping up another episode of the Building the Broncos podcast. Carl, happy birthday, buddy. Thank you for taking the time to do this today. I know we had a little bit of technical difficulties there in between, but always good to talk to you, and especially on your day of birth.
Well, thank you, man. I can't think of anything else I'd rather be doing on my birthday, so this has been fun, man.
And yep, so we hope you guys enjoyed it. Have a good one, Carl. 33 years young. Not to throw that out there, you old fart on the show. And we hope to see you guys soon. All right. See you guys later. Go Broncos. Go Draft.
You've been listening to Building the Broncos. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.